everybody, it's David with No Chaser, and today's nice and uplifting topic is talking about loss, dealing with loss as an alcoholic or an addict. You see, dealing with loss, whether it's losing a loved one, to death, or whether it's losing a relationship, or whether it's losing, a career, a job you really liked, or losing a friend for whatever reason, or if you're watching this and you have a loved one that is suffering from alcohol and addiction, and they're stuck in it so bad that you have to separate yourself. That's a form of loss too. In fact, some people say, this is a controversial quote, but some people say that, sometimes there are worse ways to lose somebody than death. Like when someone changes so much that you don't know who they are. Usually they're talking in consideration to what happens to a person with alcohol and drugs, but some people say that's not true because, death is so irreversible that even with alcohol and drugs, there's still a chance. Some people would argue, though, that like watching the person change from what they were and never seeing them come back is more painful. Whatever. I don't even know why I brought that up. Things are hard. But anyway, dealing with loss, I'm one to, when I do this show, I don't, give advice. I try not to. I come from the perspective as I relate my experience, and I can tell you things that I tried that didn't work, and I can tell you things that I tried that really seems like a smart idea that didn't work. I can tell you that what I know from others that worked for them. I haven't always been successful in recovery, but I've been trying recovery for a really long time, earnestly trying, and so I've tried all the different ways, and, I've tried, every, imaginable, like, concept and thought process you could try to adopt, every mindset, every, half attempt, every full attempt, but just that was misguided, everything like that. And so, dealing with loss, I had one, kind of recently with a person in my life, and it's difficult because, like I said, it's difficult for like normal people that don't have like an affliction that can be so damaging and destructive as alcohol and drugs. But when you're addicted to alcohol and drugs, it can be so hard because one of the main factors of alcohol and drug addiction is that we were filling a void. We were filling a void in our natural everyday life, whether that void was something to deal with our self-worth, whether there was a void that came from trauma, whether it was a void of you just had one, a God-sized hole, as some people put it, or, whether it was just something that was always missing a piece of you. It felt like you never got in life, whether it was something when you were growing up or as you progressed, whatever reason, And so when you deal with loss in your life, that's a new void, something that you may have had that you no longer have, hence the definition of loss. And now you have to deal with something more, not just coping with life without using drugs or alcohol, but coping with this new thing that has been taken from you. And, some people, it's interesting, some people that have been in recovery, they deal with loss, and it actually, even when they're new in recovery, sometimes they find a strength they didn't know they have, and it actually makes them rise to the occasion. The funny thing is, I've been in that scenario too, where I've dealt with great loss when I was newly sober, and it didn't set me off track. It seems like sometimes it's always the little things that like take you away and make you relapse. But I know some people certainly have dealt with loss, and that did make them relapse. I know one person that they lost their dog, and their dog was really important to them, and that made them relapse in a sense. And the thing is, it was truly like a different scenario because they had actually dealt with greater losses. Animals, our pets, can be so important to people. It varies on the level of importance, but they had actually dealt with bigger losses, but the loss of their dog was so huge to them because it was kind of the last thing that they felt that they had. It was the one, unconditional love in their life, and it was something that evolved, like, the loss of their father. They had even lost a significant other. This is in times of sobriety, but then loss of the pet, it was like so important to them. It was what was holding everything else, and that loss had pushed them over the edge. I consider stories like that, and I think to myself, what can one do? And, what I know that has helped people is the first thing is just to reach out for, not even just help, just reaching out for company. to not be alone. Being alone is so dangerous just for the alcohol and addict as is. Like, there's time we need alone time, and there's things that we do. I'm a person where I feel like I'm an extrovert, but I also have a lot of like hobbies or passions that require me to be alone, and so that's okay. But I'm talking about the real isolation, the real, like, you just don't want to see the world. You feel like you can't be around people because you don't want them to see you in this certain state. But that's when you kind of need it the most, because that isolation, I've being alone when you're in a bad place is difficult, and sometimes just being alone too long when you're not in a bad place can turn that way, just because it feels like the mind will eat itself after a certain amount of time. I liken it to the example of, like, the mind is kind of like a a truck stop bathroom where, before there were phones and things, just any bathroom, any public restroom, you'd see so much bad stuff carved into the wall, and it's almost like people that, like, they didn't have a phone, they didn't have a thing, and so they just were left to themselves. And that silence and that boredom times the too much, like, intense, intrusive silence of interpersonal or introspective thought just makes you, like, always bad stuff comes out. I never see, like, like, nice things carved into bathroom walls. Like, I never see, like, words of endearment or anything. It's always like the worst shit that you ever see. And it's kind of like with your mind, when it's just, you're left to a state that's by yourself, and you're craving just for some sort of stimulus, and you're craving for some sort of, like, interpersonal interaction, just some connection of some sort, and then your mind just goes to the worst place immediately. Some people more than others, but mine is certainly like that, and I don't know why. Like, when I'm left alone too long, I never think of, like, really good ideas or inventions or, like, new ways to love myself. I always just think of these, like, the negative cognitions start to take over, and they just build like a snowball. And so I would just say, you're dealing with loss, get out there and just be around people, because the other thing too is that people will also be encouraging to you, and they'll be supportive, especially if you're in recovery. They know how fragile things can be at a time like this, and so they'll comfort you. It's not a form of weakness by any means. I know men certainly deal with that a lot, where they think it's this form of weakness, and it's really not. Reaching out for help is a sign of strength, because it's so hard to do. Like, it truly is. Like, sometimes people go, yeah, whatever, it's a sign of strength asking for help. People just say that because they're trying to trick you into self-betterment. I don't know why people are so suspicious about that, but it truly is a sign of strength, just from the vantage point of, like, if it's not a sign of strength, why is it so difficult to do? I've known especially dudes that have been through a whole lot. They're veterans of war. They are dealt with, like, horrible traumas and abuse, and they take that masculine, it's a sign of weakness. It's like, really? If it's a sign of weakness, why is it so difficult for you to do? It would be, if it's a sign of weakness, then you could just do it easy. You could do easy just to prove me wrong. You could do easy to prove everybody wrong. For some reason, you can't even test the waters or dip your toe in it. So it truly is a sign of strength, not just for men, but, usually that's one thing that comes up. The being vulnerable is, like, not masculine. So yeah, whatever. But I know, obviously, the opposite sex deals with that too, where they hate that sense of weakness or vulnerability. I think it's more so that it's just the idea of just being vulnerable in that way. And, like, I struggle with it as well, like, reaching out for help, because I've always had this, I think it comes from my depressive thinking, where I just think people won't be able to help me. Or, like, not even that they'll use it against me, but it will come with the disappointment that I reached out for help, I made myself vulnerable, and it turned out to not work or something. And sometimes I made that into a self-fulfilling prophecy, where I reached out, but I reached out with such a negative attitude and a bad mindset that I made sure it wasn't going to work out. I made sure that whatever they told me was going to be, like, platitudes, and I wasn't going to like it. And I just, that's one thing, like, being around people or reaching out for help. Also, I know I need to come with a mindset that this is going to be positive, to not already shoot it down, not already shoot down the advice, or not already shoot down the things, any compliments that you give. I'm one that's bad with taking compliments, or any terms of endearment, just don't already be gunning to, like, tear it down. Just leave yourself, like, an open window, and just let the breeze, here we go, the poetry dog, let the breeze of comfort and support come into your house of whatever. So that would be one thing I would say, is when you're dealing with loss, surround yourself with people. And the other thing I'd say is to distract yourself. Something as simple as that. I mean, when you're feeling that, that grief and everything that comes with it, it can be so hard. You just want that person, or you want that thing, or you want to go back to the job you lost, or you want to pet the dog you lost, and you're just like, nothing can distract me for this. But the point is to really try to immerse yourself in a positive distraction. Not like, I'll distract myself with a handle of vodka, or I'll distract myself with a nice hit of the bubble from meth, or a shot of the needle, or whatever you take your, poison with. But just find yourself a distraction. Like, one thing that works for me is that immersing myself into nature. Like, because no matter what, nature always has the same feeling to me. Like, it always seems like it's so reliable, because I always feel a sense of something with nature. And so even if I'm in a good mood or a bad mood, or I'm feeling bored, or I'm feeling too overwhelmed, being around nature, it always remains like there's this comfort in that. It always remains this way. And it always remains this way even in any season. Like, the woods can be beautiful in wintertime, the way the snow is vibrant, and the way it like mutes everything, and that like calm, like soundless sort of energy that comes with it. Obviously, like in the summertime or in spring, there's the bloom of flowers. There's like all this stuff that nature provides. And so even if you're not a huge nature person, maybe it's an idea just to try it. Like, I live in Nebraska, where there's not like a whole bunch of mountains, and there's not this ocean I can see, but there's still forests, there's still, lakes, there's still something like that. I'm able to make it work. And there can even be something beautiful about the plains, the vast plains of, I don't know, I kind of find them depressing, but there's still stuff out there. There's a way, nature doesn't have to be this huge, grandiose spectacle, giant mountain, ocean view of something. It could just be something as simple as like your local park that happens to have just a little bit of forest near it, just going out even into a field or something like that. These are things that I can think of that come to mind that maybe can help you deal with the loss at the time. And so, with that being said, I hope some of this was helpful. I hope some of this put it into perspective. I don't want to make a long, meandering video where I kind of repeat myself. So, if you're still drinking and using, my heart goes out to you. I hope you just receive the less amount of suffering that you can. Maybe find your way. If you're new in recovery and you're like barely holding on, keep holding on, and just know that it's worth it. If you're in long-term recovery, keep it up. You can even be in a bad place. I think sometimes people think that you've just been in long-term recovery, so everything's all golden, and it's, truly not. So if you're dealing with anything, any sort of form of suffering, my heart goes out to you as well. If you're watching this because you're interested, or you have loved ones that are suffering from drug and alcohol, the affliction of that, I wish you well. Just know that behaviors or things they take part in is not your fault, and the most you can do is just kind of be there, ready for them, even if they're not ready. And if you're just watching because you're bored, hopefully I alleviated some boredom. And other than that, be well.